You're listening to SM Media, the number one place for exclusive content.
Hi everyone, and welcome to a special episode of the Scottish Football Show right here on SM Media. I'm Scott McPike. It's an absolute pleasure to be your host as always. We are going to look ahead to this weekend's League Cup final, or the Premier Sports Cup final as it's rightfully known. Sorry to our Premier Sports for not saying them first before the League Cup, but obviously it's another busy game. It's going to be one of the highlights of the season. Obviously Celtic take on Hibs at Hampden on Sunday. And we're delighted to have a fan from each side of both teams to have a look at the final ahead. We're joined by, from a Celtic state of mind, Colin. Colin, it's a pleasure to finally welcome you on the show. Thanks for coming on.
It's been a while, Scott. I do apologise, but finally we got here, and what a showpiece occasion to be discussing there.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be a good one this weekend. We're also delighted to be joined by, from the Longbangers podcast, representing Hibs, Matty Fairnie. Matty, it's a pleasure to welcome you on the show. Thanks very much for joining us.
No worries. Thanks very much for the invitation.
It's a lovely background you've got there.
As I've said before we started, it's better than the brown blinds that are actually there. But, we'll take this.
Brown. Obviously, we'll get into both teams from a different perspective in a couple of minutes, but obviously we've got some midweek football to look back on. Both Hibs and Celtic games. We'll start with the game on Tuesday night. Hibs took on Dundee. A 1-0 win. Obviously, our own goal from Paul McMullen gave Hibs the 3 points. The first 3 points in a while in the league. Matt, it was a big 3 points, obviously, and could that potentially be a turning point in terms of the league?
Hope so. We've had a couple of false dawns recently. We went to Perth and beat St Johnstone, had a great performance, and then turned in a couple of horror shows after that. So it's hard to tell with Hibs in the league. They're capable of being brilliant, but capable of being awful as well. Huge 3 points and won it with one of the best own goals I've ever seen as well.
Definitely. What was it like? What's it been like recently? Obviously, league form kind of sandwiched in between the middle of a massive win in the League Cup semi-final against Rangers. It must have been a bit kind of mixed feelings. Obviously, league form hasn't been good at all, but you've got this massive win at Hampden where obviously the game was pretty much won at half time, and it was a pretty much rapid performance in that first half.
It was a funny one because we'd had the COVID break where we'd had a couple of games postponed. Heading to Hampden, I don't think any of us thought that we were going to turn in the performance that we did against Rangers. I certainly expected, had the scoreline been the other way around, that probably would have been more along the lines of what I was expecting to happen. But then 35 minutes in, 40 minutes in, you're sitting in dreamland almost, kind of like 3-0 up against Rangers. Saw out the second half dead comfortably, and you thought, right, maybe we're going to kick on. Then the midweek we went to Ross County, had no bad performance but lost the game. Battered St Johnstone, did all right against Rangers at Easter Road but lost the game, and then went to Livingston's next game and we were proper horrendous, and that was kind of the end for Jack Ross. So it's been totally topsy-turvy. You don't care if you're coming or going as a Hibs fan at the minute.
We'll get into Celtic before we move into talk about the final as a whole. Obviously, a massive win last night, a 97th minute winner from Anthony Ralston. Gave them a 2-1 win against Ross County. Colin, obviously Celtic are on this good run just now. They're scraping wins. There's obviously the problems with injuries, which we'll get into later on. But that was a massive 3 points last night, and it did look as if the fans really that felt big.
Definitely. I was at the game last night, and I think from the point of Ross County equalising, just couldn't see where that second Celtic goal was coming from. And then going down to 10 men, you're thinking, it's just that's it. You've lost your opportunity. You're going to end up 6 points behind Rangers because they were winning at that point 2-0. But it's something that we've seen from Ange Postecoglou's Celtic this season, is that they just don't know when they're beat. They keep going till in this instance, the 97th minute. Even if there was only 6 minutes added on, that really seemed to trigger quite a few people yesterday. They don't quite understand that it's a minimum of 6 minutes added on, but we'll leave that there. Ralston, great goal at the back post, and it just shows the goals are coming from all over the team at the minute, especially with the injuries that Celtic's kind of gone through. So just grinding out the victories, as you said. I think 8 out of the last 13 wins that Celtic have had have been by a 1-goal margin. So they're finding that way to sort of play tight, play difficult, and still get the victory. And you just wonder if that's how they play now, what's it going to be like when they get the players in January, when they get the players back from injury. It's looking good. And Sunday, hopefully, sorry Matty, but hopefully Sunday's the icing on a well-deserved cake for Postecoglou this season.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it puts pressure on Rangers as well. Rangers obviously had a 2-0 win last night against St Johnstone. Rangers kind of beginning to, I think, hit that kind of extra gear that kind of I think Van Bronckhorst has brought in. Colin, would you kind of go along with that, with what you've seen of Rangers so far this season? I know you do the kind of Scottish football show on your channel and have a look at Rangers. They are beginning to kind of look a bit better than they did before Gerrard left. That kind of
They've definitely got that. They've got that new manager bounce, don't they? You get that every time a new manager comes in, and he has brought in some fresh ideas. The one thing that I think has been the key to his success so far is the fact that he's managed to get the best out of Alfredo Morelos. Mm-hmm. Because when you look at it under Steven Gerrard's last couple of games, he was almost like a holding midfielder, the way he was dropping so deep into the park. But now he's in the right areas, he's banging in the goals. And that's the Morelos of 2-3 seasons ago. That's the one that's kind of went missing for Rangers. Whether that's a good thing in the long term for Rangers is yet to be seen. Is that him playing for a move away? You don't know. But if you're a Rangers fan, you don't really care. As long as you're getting the points and as long as he's scoring, you'll take it at the minute, especially with how close the title race is this season.
Mm-hmm. Matty, did you have an eye on Wednesday night? Any of the two results of the Rangers and Celtic caught your eye?
Really a big win for Celtic. It's funny because out of the two teams, when I've seen them at Easter Road, Celtic blew us away first half at Easter Road, 3-0 up. Could have been 6 or 7, to be honest with you. Hibs were terrible, but actually Celtic's football was fantastic. The movement was incredible. And then we had Rangers, Van Bronckhorst's second or third game. And what I noticed there, the difference between Van Bronckhorst Rangers against Hibs than Gerrard's was the fullbacks sat much deeper. They weren't committing forward because that was kind of where Hibs had got some success. So you expect Rangers to win at home, 9 times out of 10. Some referees would have them 10 times out of 10. But you kind of expect them to win that. So it felt like probably a bigger 3 points for Celtic. Again, you'd expect Celtic to win at Ross County 9 times, 10 times out of 10 as well, to be fair. But I think when you get a goal right at the death, that always feels bigger than a kind of comfortable 2-0.
We'll obviously get into what's coming up this weekend, and there's a massive game, obviously the Premier Sports Cup final, hence why we're doing this special show. Before we get into that, Matty, I want to get your thoughts on this. Obviously the news during the week was the sacking of Jack Ross last week, and then now it appears the replacement has been found in the form of former Celtic midfielder Sean Maloney. What are your kind of immediate thoughts to that? Was Sean Maloney kind of mentioned beforehand, and did it come as a surprise? And what's your kind of overall thoughts on it as a whole when it comes to this Hibs team? Obviously, he's not going to be in charge on Sunday. We understand.
It looks like he's going to take over on Monday.
Yeah.
I think it was the right time for Jack Ross to go. I was a big fan of Jack Ross. So he did a good job at Hibs overall, and when he looks back, I think he could be quite proud of his record. But it was the right time for him to move on. Maloney's name came up kind of early on, but I never ever expected him to think about leaving Belgium. To be fair, I think he's had he's been quoted as saying he wanted to go to the World Cup with Belgium and see out his time there and not consider leaving early. And there was a name that kind of came out of the blue. Now I'll get the pronunciation wrong because I'm an idiot, but I think it's Kjell Knutsen, who I think is a Norwegian, who seemed to be like a popular choice amongst the Hibs fans. And then Sean Maloney was getting reported as being kind of close to having agreed terms. My initial reaction, I was probably a little bit underwhelmed. I have to say, like, having seen Sean Maloney on sports scene and things like that, I've never really found him that engaging. However, as I do with these things, going to kind of dig a little bit deeper and scratch the surface and found out a bit more about him and his coaching philosophies, etc., and his coaching background, and actually it looks like quite a brave appointment by Hibs, and one that I'm quite excited about, as long as I don't have to sit and listen to him.
Colin, obviously Sean Maloney's well known to Celtic fans, and obviously had a great career there as a player, but he's went into coaching obviously at a high level with Roberto Martinez, who was his manager at Wigan, at Belgium, and he's obviously been well thought of there. What's your thoughts to this? Because it is interesting. It did kind of come out of left field when we heard Maloney was in for the Hibs job.
I think he was linked with the Aberdeen job earlier in the season as well. Last season when Stephen Glass got appointed the Aberdeen manager, And that was one that I thought I could kind of see, because I think he's got a bit of a background up in Aberdeen, Maloney. Going into Easter Road, for me, it's a big opportunity for him, but it's a big kind of undertaking he's got with this role. When you look at it, yes, he's got the coaching experience of being the number 2 at Belgium, but for me, that's about it. And we were saying before we came on air, it's the difficult step up from being the assistant manager to being the actual manager, having the full control of everything that's going on. We understand that it's going to be Gary Caldwell that's his number 2, and Caldwell's not exactly had the best managerial experience himself. So it'll be an interesting one to see how it develops. Hibs really can't afford to get this one wrong, because you're starting to see Aberdeen clicking into a bit of a gear. You're seeing Dundee United. You don't want to end up in the bottom 6 this year, because Hibs have got a team that's good enough to be up there, sort of pushing for the European places, if not sort of solidifying European places. And Jack Ross, he just wasn't getting the best out of the players. And for what reason, I really don't know. The question I'd be interested in asking you, Matty, was, you look at Caldwell. Caldwell's coming in as part of the City group because he was the loans manager there. Do you think that'll be something he taps into in January if they do get the job, and you might see some exciting City youngsters coming up to Easter Road?
I'd hope so. We've had a wee bit of joy from City loans in the past. We had Brandon Barker for a season under Lennon, and he was excellent at Hibs. Didn't really kind of kick on when he went to Rangers. And we had Thomas Agapong, who was really exciting as well. He was just injured a lot, which was a shame, because when he was fit and playing, he was exciting to watch. I hope Caldwell and I hope Maloney can kind of tap into the contacts that they've got. I would imagine they've got quite a decent network now between them to start bringing players to Hibs. But I don't know. I don't know whether Man City will see Hibs as a kind of useful stepping stone for some of their players.
During the likes, obviously, with Jack Ross, I know that when you speak to with a few of Jack Ross's kind of players who've been with him at St Mirren and things like that, they speak very highly of him as well. That they say he's very focused on man management. Do you think that was maybe a problem at Hibs? What do you think was the reasons it went wrong? Because at the start, it went so well at the start of the season, it just seemed to fall off a cliff.
The biggest problem for Jack Ross was the squad size. So I think if I was being totally objective, I think he should have got more out of the squad that he had. But if you look at when Christian Deutsch got injured and Kel McGuinness got injured, 2 really significant players for us, and we didn't really have players to come in and replace them. He wanted a centre half and a striker in the summer window. That was kind of his 2 priority positions, and the club let him down. They brought in Nathan Woods from Middlesbrough on loan, England under-20 international. He played 1 game and he's away back to Middlesbrough already. And we brought in James Scott as well up front, who has done nothing. I think he started 1, maybe 2 games, got into trouble for not being fit. And so I think Ross's options were really limited. He had to play the same players, whether they were in form or out of form. There's players playing through injuries, just because once you go past our first 11, there's not a great deal of quality on the bench because the squad is so small. I think if you look at the first 11, there's a decent team there, but you take 1 or 2 of those players out and you start to see where the cracks are at Hibs, and that was what Jack Ross struggled with ultimately, I think.
For me, watching Hibs over the years, the thing that's always sort of supplemented the first team's been the exciting youth academy, and I don't think Jack Ross really gave a lot of young players a chance. Do you think there's maybe with the likes of Maloney coming in, who's worked with the youngsters at Celtic and then at Belgium, Gary Caldwell, who was known at Partick for giving the younger guys a chance, do you think you maybe see more of the academy players coming through at Hibs now?
I think so. I mean, to be fair to Jack Ross, he used Josh Doig a lot. So Josh Doig came in 19.
Yeah, he was a sort of star, wasn't he?
He broke into the team, and he's been playing consistently this season. Latterly, Josh Campbell's come into the midfield. I think he came in second half against Celtic when we was 3-0 down, and probably helped shift the momentum in that game a bit more in Hibs' favour. I think the biggest problem with Hibs, again, it comes back down to the squad size, is that the separation of the squads for COVID meant that we've not been able to take players who are needing to supplement the numbers in the youth team out of that training, out of the training bubbles, etc., into the first team to then to play them. So I think that's caused them some problems and might explain why we never saw as many youth players. But then he had, when you look at Jamie Gullen up front for Hibs, he's been fit and available for the majority of the season, and he's not had a look in. Kevin Nisbet, even an unfit Kevin Nisbet, has been preferred up front to somebody like Jamie Gullen. So I hope so. I think as Hibs fans, we like to see young players coming through. We have a bit of a reputation for it, which maybe isn't quite as deserved as it used to be. We kind of live on past glories with sort of the golden generation of Brown and Thompson and Riordan, etc. But I suppose every football club's the same. You like to see your young players coming through and getting a chance.
It's kind of an interesting point when you mentioned about squad size, and this is what I'm kind of keen to get Colin's thoughts on this. When you look at Celtic just now, Matty made a good point about taking a couple of players out of the team and it looks quite weak. Yeah, Kyogo and Jota, when you take them out of the team, it does, up front particularly, it does look as if there's a massive kind of lack of squad depth. And I know that was obviously common at the start of the season. We saw that Postecoglou was going to need a lot of players. Is that a concern? Is that a concern now? I don't know if Kyogo's going to be fit for Sunday. I don't know officially if that's the case, but you obviously want your big players in that occasion, don't you?
Absolutely. I mean, you look back the last time Celtic made the League Cup final, we started Lewis Morgan up front. And then you had to bring on someone like Odson Edward later on that turned the game. So having a kind of pivotal forward line for a game like this is so important. Last night, obviously, Lila Bada played through the middle, and we saw glimpses of what he can do. Obviously, it was a good finish from him, and he was doing the kind of dirty work that Kyogo does, and not the kind of dirty work where he goes down. That's not what I'm referring to before somebody jumps on that. But more the chasing down the back four, chasing down the goalkeeper, forcing people into mistakes. We saw that certainly in the first half from Abada. Second half, it sort of tailed off as Ross County came more into the game. And that's the way that Ange plays football. Like, we are the high pressing team. That's what we've been known for this season. When you take Kyogo out the side, you just don't have that. Ayeti tried it, got himself injured. David Turnbull was playing through the middle. He's not the quickest player at all. Abada offers that pace to do so. In terms of squad depth, it's not as bad as it was at the start of the season.
Yeah.
When you took someone like Kyogo and McGregor out that team, Celtic collapsed earlier in the season. That performance away at Arminville kind of summed Celtic up without Kyogo and McGregor in that team. But now we're suffering probably the same amount of injuries as what we had before, but we're finding ways to win because the players are more adapt to the system now. You saw Juranovic playing right midfield yesterday, who's played right back and left back for Celtic this season.
Yeah.
Liam Scales at left back playing that sort of inverted full back role. The team are starting to know how to almost play every single position in Ange's style of football. So probably not as bad off now, but in terms of actual depth, if we pick up another injury or two, even on Sunday, you're sitting kind of looking at the bench going, well, who do you throw on?
Yeah. Matty, this is obviously, we'll talk about how both teams got to the final. Obviously, Hibs with a 3-1 win over Rangers. It was obviously Martin Boyle hat-trick, but absolutely brilliant performance of Hibs. What impressed me that day was, obviously Hibs went 3-up and made a massive kind of fast start, but the way they controlled the game in the second half I thought was impressive, particularly that back line of Hanlon and Porteous, who I think both of them just had outstanding games. Was that semi-final just a sign of just how good this Hibs team can be on their day?
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair observation. I suppose the dilemma with Hibs is getting that consistently from them. The back line, we've shipped goals all season. I think the Dundee game in midweek was our first clean sheet in months and months. We shipped goals, with crosses in particular. And that sort of feeling has been the downfall with the side this season. We brought in Lewis Stevenson. Josh Doig has been ill, and actually that made the defence look a bit stronger. Maybe you give up something going forward when you play Stevenson, but defensively he's probably a level above Josh Doig. I wish I could say what Hibs team would turn up on Sunday. I think if we go and play like we did against Rangers, which was a surprise, we've got half a chance. But again, I think Hibs' main focus will be initially containing Celtic. I think with Rangers, we tried to give them problems straight away, and we were on the front foot and kind of caught them a wee bit off guard. I don't think we'll take the same approach with Celtic. I don't think we're able to take the same approach. I don't think Celtic have the same frailties at the back as Rangers do.
Colin, obviously Celtic got there with a 1-0 win over St Johnstone in the semi-final. James Forrest again coming to the aid with a massive goal. How big is that kind of big game experience like Forrest has, Rogic, as you mentioned, McGregor? They're big players in an occasion like this, and it's going to be key to have kind of... Obviously, Rogic was rested last night with obviously a view to Sunday. These are the type of games some of these Celtic players kind of relish, aren't they?
Absolutely, and they are the sort of last resemblance of what Celtic side dominated Scottish football for 9 years. They are the sort of key figures to that. Tom Rogic especially, the resurgence of Tom Rogic this season under Ange Postecoglou has been incredible.
Do you think that's because Ange knows him well? Do you think there's just been a kind of added motivation for Rogic?
I think there's a bit of both in there. I mean, you look at it last January, he was close to making a £4 million move to Qatar.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, but at that point, his Celtic career looked dead. He was always known as a 60-minute man because he couldn't get past 60 minutes in a game. Now you're seeing him play week in, week out, sometimes 3 times a week, playing the 90 minutes, and he doesn't seem to chuck it. I mean, look at last night. Yeah, okay, he came off the bench. 97th minute, he's still putting a crossover.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? So there's a lot more you're getting out of him now. There was kind of talk pre-season that he'd lost some amount of weight because he knew Postecoglou was coming in and he knew the kind of style of football that was coming in. Whether that's a view on what the previous regime was like and you could get away with that, or whether it's just that he kind of gave himself a kick up the backside and went, right, I need to turn my career around. But it's definitely worked. And you look at his stats, and his stats aren't been great this season, but it's what he brings to the team. I've always said there should be a second assist in football because it's not always the final pass that leads to the goal. It's maybe the pass beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
You take a look at Celtic's first goal last night. McGregor's ball into Scales absolutely splits that Ross County defence open. Scales puts it across, Nabada puts it in. Scales and Nabada get the credit for it, but it all comes from the pass from McGregor. And that's what Rogic's been doing so well this season. Matty, you were talking about the game earlier on at Easter Road, which I have to say might be one of the wettest games of football I have ever been to. I was absolutely
I agree with that.
Walking in there. That was ridiculous, man. But Rogic plays the pass through. I can't remember who he plays it to. Maybe it is Abada. And the ball comes across and Kyogo gets the tap in. It all comes from Rogic splitting that defence open. But you don't get any sort of credit for it. You've got to be watching what Rogic does to understand how important he is to this Celtic side. And last night we just didn't have anybody that could cut open defences. And you saw it took for Rogic to come on, even when Celtic went to 10 men, for the creativity to come back in the second half. So he is so important to that team. And having that winning experience at Hampden will be massive, having McGregor and Rogic available, because there isn't many others in the team that have got that experience.
Matty, what about Hibs? Obviously, the last season with the Scottish Cup final defeat against St Johnstone. Is there a sense of redemption with Hibs fans that this could be the moment to kind of avenge that defeat?
Hope so. I mean, it was a huge letdown, and it was probably for a lot of fans the final nail in the coffin for Jack Ross. And a lot of fans didn't forgive him for that performance, because Hibs were, I mean, it was horrible performance to turn up as clear favourites against a St Johnstone team that, and fair enough, they won both cups, but they weren't a great team. Do you know, they're no great team this season. A few good players in there. Most Hibs fans went in that game expecting to win it and put in a performance, and we just didn't turn up. I think when we got back to Hampden, my worry is that they see that game as the redemption. Do you know that was our first attempt back, a game we weren't expected to win, and we turned Rangers over. My worry is that a lot of the players go, right, well that's levelled it, and they didn't have that same kind of fire in their bellies going into the final. I hope with a full stadium, or almost full stadium, I think a lot of folk are kind of trying to make up their mind whether they're going to the game now. And a different atmosphere. I hope that kind of gives everybody a lift, and the kind of how you see it impacting their performances.
When you look at it from a Celtic perspective as well, when the past 4 seasons before last season, Celtic and a cup final seemed to go hand in hand. I mean, they won 8 of them, but this is a different for Celtic now. There's a new manager, there's a new kind of vibe around the club. This is massive for Celtic, isn't it, to get back to Hampden and get into a cup final again after a disappointing season last year.
This is the end of Postecoglou's first chapter at Celtic.
Yeah.
We always spoke about how When Lennon left the club, that was the end of the sort of 9 in a row era. That was the end of the quadruple treble era, and there'd been new chapters written. And Postecoglou's come in, and this is his chance to kind of put a stamp on what is that first spell, that sort of summer to January spell. Can he win the cup, the one that kind of sets you on your way? Celtic and cup finals, as you said, they used to go hand in hand. Last year we didn't have any, but football was so different last year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're kind of going back to Hampden going, well, it's just the way it's been over the last couple of years, and it is almost a privilege as a Celtic fan that you're able to do that. Matty, obviously, you know, Jack Ross getting to the semi-finals and then not kind of getting as far as that, when arguably he probably should have done. If he looks back on his time at Hibs, it'll be the one thing I think he should have done a bit better, is getting out the semi-finals. But it's going to be a great occasion, and some people say, well, if Celtic win, it's just going back to the way it was, but it's not really, because this is a new era at Celtic, and if they pick up the trophy on Sunday, it's a great way to kind of put your mark down on that. You've kind of put this one in the bag. The Scottish Cup will come in the new year, and then you focus on the league as well.
Matty, Hibs, obviously, David Gray is going to take charge as the interim manager for this game. Do we think he will set up the way Hibs usually set up? He'll obviously want to play a bit of the ball. Do you think David Gray will be more cautious in his approach for this type of game, obviously, because it is a one-off cup final?
I don't expect this to be much different to how we set up. So I've seen the last two games that we've played. There's been no real change in personnel, no real change in formation to how we were doing under Jack Ross. There's no really been a huge difference in the style of play either. I think it'll be much the same. I think we'll probably go in with a similar approach to how we played against Rangers. A lot will depend on fitness. Players in Nisbet went off injured on Tuesday night. Chris Cadden went off injured on Tuesday night as well. Now, Cadden in particular, if Cadden's fit, Martin Boyle will probably play through the middle with Nisbet. I think if Cadden's injured, we might see Doidge go up front with Nisbet, and Boyle will go out on the right. I think I would probably prefer that. I think we play better under that system than we do with Boyle through the middle. And that's probably the decision that Gray will have to make, whether he sticks with what he started with before if he can, or whether he shuffles the pack a wee bit and brings Doidge in and pushes Boyle out wide.
From a Celtic point of view, Colin, how do you think Celtic are going to set up? What's your kind of thoughts in the lineup? Could Taylor and Rogic kind of stick on to the playoff after being kind of rested last night?
I'm not 100% sold on Taylor. I think Liam Scales has come in and done a very good job, and it would be kind of harsh after the performance last night for him to drop out. As you said, it might be that it was just because that was an option there that he was rested, and you'll see Greg Taylor come in, but he's only played 90 minutes since he's come back. Mm-hmm. He's not necessarily been 100% there, so I wouldn't be surprised if you saw Liam Scales start at left back on Sunday. Looking at it, I think that the back two of Starfelt and Cameron Carter-Vickers, they've been a stick-on for Celtic this season, and it's great to have that solidity at the back, considering what we went through last year in terms of centre-halves. We're chopping and changing every other week. At right back, the decision will be whether to go with Ralston or with Juranovic. Either or, to be honest. I think depending on who's available, you may see both of them play, just like we did last night. With Ralston maybe at right back and Juranovic further forward. In the midfield, the three kind of pick themselves at the minute with Beaton, McGregor and Turnbull. One thing I did notice about them last night, though, was they were very fluid in their positioning. At times you saw David Turnbull as the centre defensive midfielder, and Neil Beaton was actually the furthest midfielder up the park, and it really confused the Ross County defence. They didn't know where to pick up and who to mark, and it was working really well. It sort of stopped in the second half, but that first half, they really cut them open. So I think that's your three in midfield, and then up front, it's a difficult one. Adam Montgomery was given the nod last night, but I don't think he'd done anything to say that jersey's his for Sunday. Will Kyogo come back into the frame? Will Forrest come back into the frame?
Do you think they go straight in if they're fit?
If they're fit, yes. Absolutely, yes. If they're fit, then my forward line would be Abada, Forrest and Kyogo. That would be my forward line if they're both fit. I think it's obviously you've got the game against Rangers coming up on the 2nd, which is a massive, massive game. If it goes ahead, I mean, who knows what's going to happen in this current climate. But if you're taking it as a 90 minutes and the 90 minutes that you've got to win, if they've got the chance of playing on Sunday, you absolutely play them. For me, looking at the Hibs team, the biggest concern for me is either Martin Boyle, who I'm a massive, massive fan of. I think he's a very, very good player. In fact, if I had the chance, I would definitely pick him up at Celtic. Or, and I didn't think about this until Matty mentioned it, Christian Doidge, because I think he's just got the ability to sort of kind of make a nuisance of himself amongst the two Celtic centre-halves. Cameron Carter-Vickers is more comfortable fighting against the sort of bigger man, but Starfelt has shown earlier on in the season he's not overly comfortable in those battles. So if Doidge gets any kind of joy out of the two of them, you're just looking at the players that's following up behind that to help him out. So yeah, I think it'll be an exciting cup final. I don't think Hibs will sit in. I think it'll be very end to end, and I think it will definitely be one for the neutrals.
Matty, who kind of worries you? Who's the kind of danger man for Celtic, do you think? Who's the one you think Hibs need to watch out for?
How long have you got? I think, well, you highlighted Rogic earlier on. The game at Easter Road, when we brought on Josh Campbell kind of went up against Rogic and kept him a bit quieter than he had been, but he was running the show before. He always has a good game against Hibs. And then anybody in that front line, I mean, Celtic were frightening at times on at Easter Road. It really was one of the best performances I've seen for a long time. Actually, you could honestly take your pick. I like Turnbull. I think Turnbull's always a threat. He's got a good shot from him. McGregor. I mean, honestly, I could just sit and, well, I couldn't name the whole Celtic squad to be fair, but I could go through like 5 or 6 of them, and you think all of them are capable of causing Hibs damage. I think where we might be all right is that Celtic didn't tend to score too many goals from what I've seen from the wide areas coming in with just like a cross and a header. They tend to work the ball well into the box, and Hibs defended quite well against Rangers when they were trying to do the same. Hopefully we've learned from the game against Celtic East Road that that's the way we need to defend to have any joy. But I think if Celtic are on their game, it's going to be a really tough 90 minutes for Hibs.
Colin, where do you think the game will be won and lost?
I think Matty's not too far wrong there. I do think it's going to be sort of where you play Celtic. If Celtic are forced to go wide, at times you've seen the crosses haven't been great. I go back to the 2 games against Livingston so far this season. I think there was about 86 crosses and we didn't score a single goal. So, and that's not even a joke. That generally it was about 86 crosses. Do you know what I mean? Celtic's best play so far this season has been cutting open defences and finding that ball through. Tom Rogic's going to be a massive, massive telling factor on where this game goes on Sunday. If he can get in behind, if he can get whoever's playing up front one-on-one with either Hanlon or Porteous, then I think it could cause Hibs a lot of problems. I probably risk the wrath of a lot of Hibs fans here, and probably Matty as well, but I think if you get any forward with a bit of pace, one-on-one with Ryan Porteous is in a lot of trouble. I think he's just kind of so adverse to putting himself into situations he doesn't need to be in. He gets himself tangled up. And when I go back to that game at Easter Road, I thought he was at fault for maybe 1 or 2 of those goals. Yeah, he got a goal, but
the 2 of them definitely, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, Celtic obviously highlighted him as the kind of weak point in that defence, and it worked for them. And I know he's obviously still a young boy and he's still coming through, but I just think the hype on him at the minute is just a bit above where his station is. I think he's got a bright future, but he's still got a lot to learn.
Matty, I'm keen to get your thoughts on this, because I'm not like, what is the opinion of Ryan Porteous within the Hibs support at the moment?
Very highly rated. So what you'll get, one of the boys on the Longbangers podcast, Colin, has called him out a couple of times for being at fault for goals, and he seems to get like a bit of a free pass for a lot of Hibs fans. My view on Porteous is that when he plays well, Hibs play well. There's him and Boyle, who are absolutely integral to Hibs' performances.
Yeah.
I think when Boyle's on his game, we've got a great chance. If you keep him quiet, Hibs are pretty poor. And defensively, when Porteous plays well, I mean, there are times where he's an absolute rock, and one-on-one, sometimes he gets caught out, but I think that's the same with most defenders. There's no very many defenders who are always, I mean, you got your Van Dijks and what have you in the world who they win pretty much every battle that they're in, but Porteous has got a really good success rate, and I think between him and Hanlon, they've got a good understanding with each other most of the time, and they tend not to get into positions where they're getting faced up one-on-one that much as a result of that. Porteous has got a great future ahead of him. I think he's a really good player, a good footballer as well. I think he learned a lot, ironically, from Effie Ambrose for playing alongside him. I mean, Ambrose kind of always got that sort of bomb scare reputation. I thought Ambrose was terrific, and you see Porteous coming out of defence in a similar way that Ambrose did. He's destined for much bigger things than I think he's definitely up there as one of our best players.
It was interesting to see the bid coming in from, was it Russia for him, for £1 million? I mean, that's derisory, right? He's worth a lot more than that. But if there was, for example, he was to come out and say in January, right, I've had my time, I'm ready to go, what kind of fee would you think he would get? For me, I was asked this before, and I thought somewhere in the region of £3 million.
Aye, it'd be about that, between 2.5 to 3.5, round about that. So I think 3 million would be reasonable for him. I think he's just starting to break into the Scotland squad. I think once he gets games for Scotland, obviously that bumps it up. But he's played every season in a team that finished third. They got to a cup final. They got to 2 others. Well, obviously you have to get to a semi-final to get to the final. But I think he's played in 4 or 5 of the last domestic semi-finals that have been there. Yeah. So his experience is clocking up. He's played in Europe and equipped himself well at that level as well. So I think 3 million would be reasonable.
Colin, the Celtic fans, I would say, have really bought into Ange Postecoglou. And what would a first trophy this early on, what would that mean to the support and obviously for Ange's reputation?
I think they would sing even louder, they would scream his name louder, they would find new songs for him, and he would definitely have an even deeper place in the Celtic fans' heart. Look, everybody's bought into, well, I'd say everybody, 99.9% of Celtic fans have now bought into Ange Postecoglou, and I think that grows week on week. It's not just the style of football that he's putting out there, it's the way he handles himself, it's the way that he represents the club, and it's the connection that a lot of people at Celtic have with him, because it feels as if he's just like a fan. It feels as if it's like you can relate to him. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And he mentioned earlier on, we had the chance to interview him for a Celtic State of Mind as part of the fan media conference. And one of the questions was asked to him about how he's found the reception from the Celtic fans so far. And he says, do you know, I don't feel as if I've earned it yet. I don't feel as if I've earned this adulation that I've received from the fans. And I don't think he understands how much of a ruin Celtic were in. You go back to that last game of last season, and Matty, obviously, it was at Easter Road and finished 0-0. And that Celtic side, you look at it then and you look at it now, the transformation that he's done in a number of months and the way that he's got Celtic playing, it has to be a rewarding thing, and I don't think he quite understands how much he's turned it around. So for him to finally get the first bit of silverware, I think he will see that as a sort of job well done for him. But then straight away he'll be looking at the next 90 minutes. We've got St Mirren the Wednesday night after that. That'll be his first thought right away, and that's the way he plays football, which is quite refreshing to see. But for the Celtic fans, I mean, he's already gone down as a bit of a cult hero, but he'll go down as a proper hero when he starts bringing home the silverware as well.
Yeah, definitely. Matt, if you have perspective, how big would this trophy be, considering it's obviously David Gray's going to be the manager and it's been an up and down season? How big would this be this early in the season?
Massive. There's a fair bit of disengagement with the Hibs fans at the moment. Like, our crowds are down. The football's not been great to watch, and there's definitely something needed to sort of spark us back into life. And you can't really ask for anything more than a cup to kind of do that. The lift we got for winning the Scottish Cup 2016, the kind of we rode the crest of that wave for probably 3 years after it, 4 years even. You know, it was a huge moment in time for the football club. we need something like that at the moment to kind of just invigorate it, get a wee bit of spark back, and probably for Ron Gordon as well as the owner, kind of give him a bit more credibility, because people, because we never had the best transfer window in January, there are some question marks around his intentions, but I think as soon as you have a bit of success, folks start to buy into it. So huge for a number of reasons, and also to kind of bury that or put behind the kind of the poor performance last time we were in a cup final.
Mm-hmm. Right, let's get into score predictions to close the show. Colin, what do we think is going to happen on Sunday? What's your thoughts? Give us a wee prediction.
I think it's still, I mean, obviously we're only a couple of days away from it, but it's still very difficult to see how it's going to go, because I'm not sure which Celtic side's going to line up. We're hoping that we'll see maybe one or two of the injured players back in. Keogh and Forrest hopefully being those two. If they come into it, it kind of gives Celtic an extra dimension in their forward line. Whatever the Celtic team goes out, I just know Hibs are going to step up. Hibs will definitely step up to the occasion. I've seen it most times that the Hibs have played Celtic over the number of years. Probably the one exception being that 45 minutes we discussed earlier on in the season, but there'll be a lot of players that will be looking to sort of right that wrong. Look, if Celtic get the first goal, then they could potentially make it a bit more comfortable for themselves. But the longer that it goes on tight, especially with the backing of the Hibs fans and the Celtic fans, it's going to be a very, very close game. Celtic have won something like 8 of their last 13 with the odd goal. So I'm going to go and keep it tight, and I'll say Celtic to win 2-1.
Big goal with Colin. Matty, what's your thoughts? Give us a wee score prediction for the Premier Sports Cup final.
I think it will be... I think Celtic will dominate. They'll put pressure on Hibs. I think there'll be goals in the game. 2-1 Hibs.
2-1 Hibs. And I'm going to leave my decision to the predictor we will put out tomorrow, so I'm not going to sit in the fence for the time being. We are going to obviously have continuous coverage of the Premier Sports Cup final. We'll cover it in the flagship show on Monday. Colin, Matty, it's been an absolute pleasure to be both on the show. Thanks very much for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the final. It's going to be a good watch.
Thanks for having us.
Cheers, lads.
Thank you very much to everyone that's tuned in. Please subscribe to our podcast and YouTube channels, and follow us on social media for consistent Scottish football content. Thanks very much, everyone. We'll see you soon. Cheers.